What do India and Israel have in common? They're both accused of being occupiers. Like the Palestinians, Kashmiris have shown generational resilience in the face of brutal crackdowns and dwindling freedoms. While there are ongoing debates about whether or not Kashmir is occupied under international law, there are some striking similarities between India's presence in Jammu and Kashmir and Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territories. Both countries have heavily militarized spaces they control, and armed forces in those spaces are frequently accused of human rights violations. And India also plans to follow Israel's example of building segregated settlements. We're going to look at what India has been up to in Kashmir and how the South Asian country that used to support the Palestinian cause ended up taking lessons straight out of the Israeli playbook. Before we begin, you need to understand that the entire Himalayan territory referred to as Kashmir is split up and administered by 3 countries: Pakistan, China, and India. The boundaries between them are heavily disputed, including by India because it sees the entire territory as its own. And that territory has prompted some serious hostility between neighbors, including at least 2 wars between Pakistan and India. Those nuclear-armed neighbors have been fighting over Kashmir since literally their creation in 1947. Quick history lesson.
At the time of partition, Kashmir was a princely state, and it was unique in that a majority of its population was Muslim, but the ruler was Hindu. His name was Hari Singh. He was supposed to decide whether Kashmir would join India or join Pakistan. And he actually wanted to be independent, but then he faced a rebellion by Jammu Muslims. As a result of that rebellion, tribesmen from what is today Pakistan were trying to come into Kashmir to try to liberate Kashmir's Muslims from the Hindu ruler. And he panicked, so he reached out to the government of India. He asked for their military support, and the Indian government basically let him know that they would only give him that military support if he acceded to India, signed a treaty of accession.
The fighting men of free Kashmir prepared to defend their land as Pandit Nehru poured in troops by air to aid the Hindu minority.
That whole treaty is controversial, whether he signed it in duress or whether he actually signed it, but that's besides the point. There is a treaty of accession that exists. But what's important to note is that India was only supposed to take control over Kashmir's foreign affairs, defense, and communications. The treaty itself stated that the future of the region would be determined by the people. There'd be some mechanism for the people to determine their own future.
Article 370 of India's constitution gave a certain degree of autonomy to Indian-administered Kashmir, whose international status remains disputed. A special status was granted to Jammu and Kashmir, which today consists of 3 regions: Jammu, Kashmir Valley, and Ladakh. Kashmiris were allowed to have their own flag, create their own constitution, and their own set of laws. Article 370 also prevented outsiders from buying property in the state. But in a dramatic shift, India's government changed the rules by revoking Article 370 in August 2019.
इस नई व्यवस्था के तहत हम सब मिलकर आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद से जम्मू कश्मीर को मुक्त कराएंगे.
Revoking Kashmir's autonomy was a long-standing demand of the Hindutva, the right-wing Hindu nationalist movement that is the core of Prime Minister Modi's base.
For the right-wing Hindutva movement in India, Kashmir was seen as an integral part of India. And even in 1947, different Hindu nationalist movements at the time were not happy with Kashmir being given a special status.
Anticipating resistance, India placed the parts of Kashmir it controls under an indefinite lockdown before announcing its changed status. Phone, internet services, and cable networks were shut down, and a number of prominent Kashmiri politicians put under house arrest. They also deployed thousands of extra troops to join the hundreds of thousands already stationed in Kashmir.
हमने क्या किया है इतना बड़ा गुनाह कश्मीरियों ने? इससे क्या होगा? कश्मीरी के जज्बात ये दबा देंगे? कब तक दबाएंगे?
India, with 1.3 billion people, is often called the world's biggest democracy. But its citizens in Jammu and Kashmir would beg to differ.
हमारे लिए को न कोई आज़ादी है, न कुछ है, और हमको फौज के साथ दबाया.
repression has been a part of Kashmiri reality for decades.
So if we think about the basic aspects of democracy like freedom of speech, freedom of movement, free and fair elections, none of those have happened in Kashmir.
The demand for self-determination among the local population came up against an Indian political consensus that has steadfastly rejected the right to choose what had been promised to Kashmiris by the international community. Lately, that repression has included restrictions on the press and repeated shutting down of the internet. There are also laws that ban freedom of assembly.
So there is this section 144 which has been imposed permanently in Jammu and Kashmir, which prohibits Kashmiri people to come out on streets. More than 4 people cannot assemble. So the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly of the people of Jammu and Kashmir has been permanently choked.
Despite all these obstacles, Kashmiris continue to demand the right to choose their own future, whether it's becoming fully independent, joining Pakistan, or staying with India.
Through a referendum, people of Jammu and Kashmir would decide about their future. We do not think that it's too much to ask for this right of self-determination. So that's the basic demand of Kashmiri people from last more than 70 years, which has been denied.
And India's repression has fueled resistance. Much like Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories, India has heavily militarized Jammu and Kashmir.
The ordinary life for a Kashmiri is like we see less Kashmiris and more army men around us, and I think there is a sense of hostility among them.
An estimated 500,000 to 700,000 troops police Jammu and Kashmir, whose population, by the way, is just 12.5 million, making it one of the most militarized regions in the world. And where there's a heavy militarized presence overshadowing a disempowered local population, history shows us this can lead to human rights violations.
The daily life of Kashmiri is full of humiliation and abuses. The armed forces are extremely hostile. They have brutalized Kashmiris and they conduct themselves as a military occupation.
Security forces have broad powers to act with impunity against the local population in Kashmir. They can arrest people without a warrant and detain them for an unspecified period of time. And they can use lethal force on any gathering of more than 4 people, meaning Kashmiris risk their lives even to stage peaceful protests. Human rights groups have accused Indian troops and armed groups fighting India of a wide range of violations. They range from torture and rape to enforced disappearances and extrajudicial executions.
Thousands of people have been killed. More particularly in last 30 years, 70,000 people have lost their lives. More than 8,000 people have been disappeared. And there are thousands of cases of torture, sexual violence, human shield, and many other human rights abuses. There is not even a single case where justice has been delivered to those who have been wronged by the Indian state agencies.
Like their young counterparts in Gaza, millennials and especially Gen Z Kashmiris grew up in an environment of politically motivated violence and government-led oppression. This means Kashmiris are very aware of the similarities between their own struggle and the struggle of Palestinians, and that's probably why they haven't been shy to show solidarity in numbers.
जो फिलिस्तीन में हो रहा है वो हमारे लिए बाइस तशवीश ही नहीं बल्कि हमारे लिए गम का एक बहुत बड़ा वजह है.
India has often responded to Kashmiri resistance, both armed and unarmed, with this. India has long accused Pakistan's intelligence agency of supplying weapons and training to the Kashmir armed uprising, which began in the late 80s and early 90s. Clashes between the armed resistance and Indian troops caused civilian deaths and Hindus fleeing Kashmir Valley. Pakistan denies playing any ongoing role. So, with the population increasingly frustrated and alienated from India and its institutions, Modi's government has chosen to deal with Kashmir's resistance by simply revoking the Muslim-majority state's autonomy, opening the way for political and demographic changes. Formally revoking Article 370 was a play to Modi's Hindu nationalist base, and it may be part of a wider offensive against India's Muslim population.
So one of the promises that the BJP and Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister, has made is that they will do away with Article 370. And this is a way that he has been able to mobilize the Indian masses, mobilize his base, in one way to distract from other issues that the country is currently dealing with, but also as a way to garner enough public support so that he can actually take on even further authoritarian steps that will go beyond Kashmir.
Along with revoking the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir, the government has revoked the laws that had prevented outsiders from buying property and settling in the territory.
This was something that was seen as being integral to kind of protecting Kashmir's special status and protecting Kashmir's cultural nationhood, especially because Kashmir was seen as a disputed territory.
By taking away land-owning privileges from Kashmiris, the Indian government has essentially put Kashmir up for sale. Allowing Indians from the rest of the country to buy property and settle permanently in the disputed territory will push out the local population.
This was the one kind of thing that Kashmiris were able to hold on to on some level, that they at least could be present in the land and that people from outside could not buy land or property there. But now even that has been taken away from them. So for Kashmiris, they see this as a life and death situation.
Critics fear the government's goal is to change the demographic makeup of Kashmir. This would help it crush the resistance that's given India problems for decades.
What that means is that for the long term, India can say, listen, we have no issues in Kashmir. We have a significant Hindu population here. What are we going to do with them? So all future decisions to be made on the status of Kashmir are basically going to be put to rest, right? So this whole movement of the right to self-determination, of freedom, is going to be put to rest because the demographics will have changed in the region.
Back in July 2019, a senior member of the ruling party announced it was going to revive plans to build Hindu settlements in Kashmir. The plan consisted of constructing segregated enclaves for some 200,000 to 300,000 Hindus in the predominantly Muslim Kashmir Valley. Does that sound familiar by any chance?
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a major surge in construction in West Bank settlements.
Once you do that, you immediately have to think about two things. One is that that land is already taken over by people, so the process of getting those people out of that land inevitably be a violent one. And because of the demographics of the region is majority Muslim, so that will mean an ethnic cleansing of the region's Muslims.
It probably doesn't come as a surprise, but as India takes a page from Israel's playbook regarding settlements and demographic politics, the two right-wing governments have grown friendlier.
This visit is an occasion to rejuvenate the bonds of our friendship.
We've seen that in the past few years, India and Israel are getting closer and closer together. Israel is one of the largest suppliers of weapons and military equipment to India. So there's a number of trade deals and military deals that exist. They both share a similar problem. They're both occupying territories of people who are demanding their rights and demanding their land. They also share strategies in terms of how to conduct counter-terror work. Both are very Islamophobic in how they approach, whether it's Kashmiri Muslims or Palestinian Muslims. They frame them in relation to the war on terror as extremists, as terrorists, and not as people who are just demanding their right to be free and to live in dignity.
India is seemingly determined to absorb Kashmir in a power grab, and the international community is standing by. Historically, the United Nations has sought to mediate between India and Pakistan over Kashmir and urged both sides to avoid provocations. In a 2018 report, the UN also called on both Pakistan and India to respect Kashmiri's right to self-determination. Regardless of UN rulings and the protests of Pakistan and China, India considers Jammu and Kashmir an internal matter, and diplomatic and trade relations with India will make many countries simply look the other way.
There will have to be significant international pressure from a number of countries to really take India to task. A number of countries enjoy economic relations with India, which is why in the past they've been afraid to say anything about Kashmir because they don't want to jeopardize that. In terms of the United States, the US and India have increasingly enjoyed close relations, close trade deals, arms agreements.
So what's going to happen to Kashmiris?
They're really just trying to make it so hard for Kashmiris to resist. That's really going to be a Pandora's box, because what you'll have is a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, and again, it's a life and death situation for them, so people are going to take to the streets. And they'll be met with live fire, ammunition, pellet guns. Internationally, it's really important for people to understand that In all struggles relating to anti-fascism, anti-Islamophobia, anti-occupation, anti-settler colonialism, Kashmir is an integral part of this equation. It's been ignored for too long, but people need to understand that when they are thinking through these systems of oppression or political repression, that Kashmir is integral to that.